Hello. Welcome to our video session number 9, where we'll continue our discussion on areas of our differences as a society, beginning now with the consideration of our origins. At the moment, it appears that there are roughly 3 schools of thought that are being considered when people discuss, on the one hand, whether the world was created 6,000 years ago in 6 days by God, or on the other hand, whether it happened over millions or perhaps billions of years as a natural process not involving God or anyone else. There is a third school of thought that's been making news somewhat more recently, and it is that which is being called intelligent design. There are many in the Christian community who, in their love for God and in their zeal to serve Him, have taken the approach which says that the Bible teaches us that the world was created by God 6,000 years ago. They feel very strongly that every word in the Bible must be accepted as being taken literally. Their timing for the creation of the world is contrary to every scientific consideration based on existing scientific knowledge and understanding, which is considerable. I can truly understand, however, the reasons why it is that those who have that understanding feel the way that they do. In addition, they've often been put by their clergy and others in the position where they feel that somehow if they do not subscribe to this way of thinking, then they don't have the level of faith within themselves that's required in order to be found acceptable in the eyes of God. I'd like, however, to respectfully offer some thoughts for their consideration. Many of us remember from our high school history lessons that there was a time when the church held such influence that they could have anyone who did not agree with their understanding of the world declared as a heretic and put to death. Despite scientific discoveries which brought knowledge to the contrary, the church still clung to the belief that the sun and the rest of our solar system revolved around the earth. That church doctrine persisted for a great many years. It continued far too long, even after scientific evidence to the contrary had begun to be accepted throughout the so-called civilized world. We must therefore go back to the Bible and examine it carefully in order to make the following point. The Bible, throughout its teachings, uses symbolism, parables, and allegory extensively. These methods of teaching are very obvious in the book of Daniel and in the book of Revelation. Those who take the Bible literally readily agree to that fact. Nevertheless, they find it difficult, if not impossible, to believe that such symbolism, parables, and allegory could play a significant part in the teachings contained in the rest of the Bible also. They insist that it must be accepted literally. Can we consider that God has written these words for us in His own ways, for His own purposes, as well as for our instruction? We must open our minds and our hearts to His intent and His purposes, as well as to His literal words. I would never suggest that those who have the belief that every word of the Bible should be taken literally be prevented from believing whatever they wish to believe. However, I do object very strongly, however, when, as a group, they come together and insist to lawmakers that their beliefs should be made a part of the teachings in the public school system. Once again, it would appear that you have the members of the church wanting the government, and in this case the public school, to do their jobs for them. The public schools were not created to teach religious beliefs and must never be used for that purpose. The teaching of religious beliefs belongs in the home and in the church, synagogue, mosque, temple, or private schools created for that purpose. And those who seek to place those teachings in the public schools appear to be saying that they can't or won't be able to perform these religious teachings on their own. The same is true of prayer. Prayer belongs in the quietness of our heart, not as a public display in the public schools. If you're a person who follows the Judeo-Christian Bible, isn't that what your Bible teaches you about prayer and praying? You know that it does. The world of science as it exists in our society today has a very structured set of criteria which determines what is accepted as true and provable scientific knowledge. When a certain area of research reaches the point that the knowledge is so dependable that it can be relied upon, then that area of knowledge is deemed ready to be added to the textbooks for teaching in our public schools. One should not fault science simply because its level of knowledge exists only to a certain point of understanding. As scientific knowledge continues to grow in the years and decades ahead, they will move closer and closer to the knowledge that science and the manifestations of God on the physical plane and other planes may be no more than two sides of the same coin. Perhaps it's even true that both sides of that so-called coin are one and the same. I happen to believe that such things are possible, but I also believe that this will not happen until humankind achieves significant growth in love, compassion, tolerance, peace, and understanding. Such knowledge is revealed to humankind only when we're ready, and I see no signs of such readiness in the world at large today. Nevertheless, let's teach the children in our public schools that which we now know to be true today, and which can readily be proved by scientific methods. Even that carries with it no guarantee of infallibility, because new knowledge is making old knowledge obsolete every day in different areas of science. However, today's knowledge is what we have available to teach, and it should be used in the education of our children in the public school system. That in no way prevents families, churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, or private schools from teaching their beliefs as they will. But those beliefs do not belong as part of the curriculum or extracurricular activities of the public school system. Our schools teach children from many different family backgrounds, and these backgrounds include the family religious beliefs. I cannot overstate the importance of the fact that the teaching of religious beliefs does not belong in the public schools unless those teachings are part of a specific class designed as being for the purpose of impartially and comparatively providing information about the world's major religions. Simply an educational process, not a religious process. Teach your children the religious beliefs that you want them to have, and teach those beliefs in your home and in the church, private school, synagogue, mosque, or temple of your choice. There is, as mentioned earlier, a third religious belief about the creation of the world and the universe that has been given the name intelligent design. This belief teaches that the world as it exists could not have come about by happenstance, that the creatures on it did not evolve by happenstance, and that therefore there must be some design that was followed by a higher intelligence in the creation of the world, perhaps even the universe, and its creatures. It's easy to understand why this idea has been laughed at by a great many scientists and others of scientific bent. They must, because of their training, insist on being able to use the five senses or other means such as mathematics, etc., to prove whatever premise they set out to investigate. I, on the other hand, have for many years maintained the idea that there is no conflict in my mind between the biblical representation and the scientific representation regarding the creation of the universe and this planet. The time that it took for that creation is not important to me, because the Bible teaches that in God's eyes 1,000 years are like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. That symbolism should be telling us that God sees time in a way that's significantly different than our own, and that it's therefore unimportant whether it took 6 literal days, as we now measure days, or 6,000 years, or 6 billion years, as we now measure years, to create all that we look upon with wondrous eyes each day. God, of course, is not the only entity in the higher realms. There are countless beings who serve Him tirelessly and constantly. Although we have free will, these beings, many of whom are mentioned in the Bible, may whisper softly into our hearts to give us the opportunity to make the right choices. My own strongly held beliefs include the belief that God exists and that He and His higher unseen agents over great periods of time influenced, encouraged, or inspired the direction of our evolving world and its creatures. Nevertheless, under no circumstances should those beliefs or any other religious or spiritual beliefs be taught in public schools. Let me also say at this point that man did not evolve from apes. The story of God creating man from the dust of the earth, however, is a symbolic way of saying that our physical makeup includes and consists of those elements that exist on the planet, the periodic table. Our spirit, however, is in God's image. Man's existence involves other factors that cannot and will not be explained adequately in a presentation such as this, although I will say that God and or his agents, those who serve him, were involved, as they are with most or all things of any significance that transpire. I will say again, however, that the teaching of these and other religious and spiritual beliefs belongs today in the home and in the church, synagogue, mosque, or temple, private school. If you choose to send your children to a private school, it's your right and prerogative to do so, but it should not be paid for in whole or in part by public government funds. Such funds for education belong to the public schools and are needed there. If you're a person without religious beliefs or without belief in God, then I have no doubt that all of this must sound like mumbo-jumbo to you, or at best, absolute nonsense. Like the rest of us, you also are entitled to believe your beliefs. But those beliefs also do not belong in the public schools. The public schools are a place for learning secular knowledge about ourselves, our society, our history, our world, and the universe. Homes and other places of worship, as well as private schools, privately financed and set up for that purpose, are the proper places for religious teachings. Once again I say to you, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. We now come to the end of this session in the series that examines our world and our differences from the perspective of the material world. In the next session, number 10, we'll consider more of the remaining areas of difference that are being considered in this series, beginning with gun control. Thank you again for watching.